Let's talk about Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. I mean, you've probably heard the story, the guy who went from a log cabin to the White House. But he was also the man who had to lead the nation through its absolute greatest crisis, the Civil War. His story really is the story of America itself.
And this quote right here, wow. Lincoln said this back in 1858, and it's almost like he could see the future. It just perfectly sets the stage for the massive struggle that would define his entire life, his presidency, and really, the very soul of the country.
So, here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll look at his journey in 5 parts. We'll start with his humble beginnings, then get into the crisis that literally split the nation in two, his leadership during the war, how he completely redefined American freedom, and finally, the incredible legacy he left for all of us.
Okay, so to really get who Lincoln was, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, back to the American frontier, because that's where his character was really forged.
Lincoln's early life was just one challenge after another, but it was also a story of pure, relentless ambition. You can see on the timeline, he starts in a log cabin, loses his mom young, moves his family out to Illinois. But this guy had a serious thirst for knowledge. He basically educated himself, and by 1834, he gets himself elected to the state legislature. Just 2 years later, he becomes a lawyer, all on his own. And then his life takes another huge turn when he marries Mary Todd, who came from a rich, slave-owning family. Think about that, a personal connection to the very issue that would later consume his life.
I love this quote because it gives you a peek right into his soul. From the very beginning of his career, his whole identity was wrapped up in this idea of integrity. And believe me, that core value was about to be tested like never before. But you know, a guy like Lincoln couldn't just stay an honest lawyer out on the prairie. There was this huge national crisis brewing, something that was about to tear the country apart, and it was going to pull him right back onto the main stage.
By the 1850s, the United States was basically 2 different countries, just sharing a map. You had the North, which was industrial, built on free labor, and saw slavery as a huge problem. And then you had the South, an agricultural society where the entire economy, their whole way of life, was built on the institution of slavery. These weren't just little disagreements. These were fundamental conflicts just waiting to explode.
And throwing gasoline on this fire was the abolitionist movement. These were the people calling for slavery to end immediately. Now, it's really important to get this. Lincoln's public stance at first wasn't full-on abolition. He believed slavery was wrong for sure, but his main focus was stopping it from spreading into the new Western territories. And then came the moment that changed everything. The Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. This law just blew up all the old compromises. It said that settlers in new territories could just vote on whether or not to have slavery. For Lincoln, this was a line in the sand. It was a moral outrage that yanked him right out of his law practice and threw him back into the center of the fight, setting him on a direct path to the presidency.
And that path led him straight to the White House. But his victory, instead of bringing the country together, was actually the final spark that set the whole thing ablaze.
This chart tells you everything you need to know. Lincoln wins the presidency in 1860, right? But look at those numbers. He won with less than 40% of the popular vote, and get this, his name wasn't even on the ballot in 10 southern states. America had basically elected a president for just one half of the country. The South's reaction was immediate and, well, absolute. They saw Lincoln's election as a direct threat to their entire way of life. So, before he even had a chance to give his inauguration speech, the House had already started to divide. 7 states walked out and formed the Confederate States of America.
On April 12, 1861, Confederate cannons opened fire on Fort Sumter. And just like that, the political crisis was over. The military one had begun. Lincoln's response was fast. He called for 75,000 volunteers to put down the rebellion. The Civil War was on.
So what kind of commander-in-chief was Lincoln? Well, he wasn't sitting back and letting other people run the show, that's for sure. This guy taught himself military strategy, literally checking out books from the Library of Congress.
He was constantly managing his generals, firing the ones who weren't aggressive enough. He even stretched presidential power to its absolute limits, doing things like suspending habeas corpus, because he believed you had to take drastic steps to save the republic itself.
But as this brutal war dragged on and the casualties piled up, Lincoln started to realize something. Just saving the old Union, it wasn't enough. The war had to be for something bigger.
I mean, you have to ask, right? What could possibly justify all this death, all this destruction? Lincoln found the answer by completely reframing the purpose of the war, turning it from a political fight into a moral crusade.
And here is Lincoln's masterstroke, the Emancipation Proclamation. From a military perspective, it was designed to cripple the South's war effort, but its moral power was even bigger. It officially turned the war into a fight for human freedom. It gave the Union a powerful new reason to fight.
And the impact was instant. The proclamation swung the doors wide open for black men to join the Union Army. For the very first time, men who had been enslaved were now carrying rifles, fighting for their own liberation. This was a game changer, both strategically and symbolically.
A few months later, at a battlefield cemetery in Gettysburg, Lincoln gave what might be the most famous speech in American history. In just a couple of minutes, he redefined the whole meaning of the war. He said it was a test to see if a nation conceived in liberty and built on the idea that all men are created equal could even survive. The fight wasn't just about the Union anymore, it was about the survival of democracy itself.
So, Lincoln had won the war. He'd redefined the nation. His final job was to heal it, to bring everyone back together. It was a task he would tragically never get to finish.
In his moment of greatest victory, with the war finally over, Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. He guided the country through its absolute darkest hour, only to be cut down right as the sun was beginning to rise.
So what is his legacy when you boil it all down? Well, he saved the United States. He made sure it remained one nation. He drove the passage of the 13th Amendment, which ended slavery for good. And through all that, he completely redefined the promise of America, centering it on freedom and equality for everyone.
And yet, Lincoln is still a really complex figure. He wasn't perfect. As you can see here, he held some of the common prejudices of his day. Just look at that quote on the left from 1858. But at the very same time, he had this deep core belief in the universal rights of all people, which you see in the quote on the right. His own views were changing, but his legacy is ultimately defined by his actions and by his final commitment to that founding principle that all men are created equal.
In the end, I think Lincoln's real legacy is captured in that famous line from Gettysburg. It's a vision for democracy that still challenges every single one of us. And it leaves us with a question that's just as important now as it was 150 years ago. How do we keep working to make sure that this government of the people, by the people, and for the people really does work for all the people?